Top story tonight is the news upending Trump's embattled DOJ and driving outrage against Trump in the powerful corridors of Wall Street. Trump's largely admitted agenda of abusing power to investigate, even indict those who exercise their right to stand up to him, an effort which has probed and indicted several major figures, including the flailing or failed cases against FBI vet Comey and New York Attorney General James, now includes another target, as the Trump administration has been outed for this news, launching an unusual criminal probe into an official who's clashed with Trump for years, you may recall, Federal Reserve Chair Powell. That's driving these headlines today. Powell joins this list of people who are, remember, diverse in their backgrounds, party affiliation, and all kinds of other factors. Indeed, what they have in common on the enemies list that Trump's own aides promised, some of them under oath, not to pursue, all they have in common is they've exercised their rights to stand up to Trump. And Powell's entire job is to run independent policy, not bow to any politician's demands. Not President Biden, who he served before, not Trump in his first term, etc. That's why the Fed's independent. By doing that job independently, he's clearly upset Trump, just as President Trump cracked down on officials that we showed you, like Comey or his former appointee Bolton. Powell responding now by directly accusing Trump of abusing this threat of criminal charges to interfere with the Fed's independent work.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
That's the rare video statement pushing back. The details about this new Trump DOJ case sound almost comically thin. They don't involve any obvious misconduct or financial matters or some personal matter or crime alleged. Instead, they have Powell testifying, something you're supposed to do in the job, and whether he was 100% accurate in testimony about the scope of a long-running renovation of the Fed building. Powell's adamant that that topic itself, the whole thing, is a lie, is a fake pretext. He said as much in the statement in a different part. Trump's also used similar types of claims to go after another member of the Fed, in her case just trying to say there was some sort of financial malfeasance and then oust her over that, which she doesn't really probably have the power to do, but it's all the way going up to the Supreme Court. Trump also happened to tour the renovations now being discussed. This was last summer. He toured them with Powell.
It looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed. You just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago. We finished Martin 5 years ago.
It's part of the overall work.
But it's not new.
You can see there the kind of fact-checking that the president's not accustomed to in person, maybe didn't like. But the issue here with Trump is he's now claiming he doesn't even know about this probe. He is denying it, which is a reminder that this probe is suspicious enough, bad enough, that the president doesn't want to be tied to it. But allies of Powell, independent experts, even some Republican members of Congress find that hard to believe. And remember, we have a system where sometimes the government is given a certain amount of deference in life, in law, in policy. When the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out numbers in normal times, we take those, we might analyze them, sometimes fact check them, but there's some deference. Donald Trump has blown up any such deference. And so it is not an ideological or political matter when someone lies this much, this frequently about these topics, that he is now finding that even Republicans, let alone the rest of the reality-based community, don't give him deference. They don't believe that this is the legitimate reason for the probe. And Trump's admitted abuse of federal probes against others adds to that picture, and how this probe may be tainted by Trump's political appointee, Jeanine Pirro, former Fox host, overseeing it. There's another Trump loyalist also involved. Bill Pulte serves as the, quote, attack dog on Powell and other Trump targets like Letitia James. He is now under scrutiny for using his power to try to build the groundwork for 4 different probes that we know of In fact, showing that he thinks he can weigh in on this, he has a different job. He's not at DOJ. He even posted about how I believe whoever the president names chair will be excellent and Powell will soon be gone. Powell's Fed chairmanship does set to expire this year, but he has several more years on the Fed. And this individual, Pulte, seemed very comfortable posting about it. Now, again, this may be a tell in the same way that Trump guiltily doesn't want anything to do with this sort of news today. Now Pulte says he can't discuss this even after discussing it before.
Why is Trump's DOJ investigating Chairman Powell? Is this all politics?
That's outside. This whole thing is outside of my purview, Maria, so I'd refer you to the DOJ on that matter.
If it's outside of his purview, he better tell his own Twitter. The DOJ does not have credibility under Trump and Bondi. That may be a sad fact. It may complicate cases where we do want to look at what the government says and take it seriously. But these revenge cases, some of them dismissed, some of them dropped, some of them awaiting trial, several of them involving subpoenas flying around, indicting a congressional candidate, they have hit already a ton of setbacks. We've added Powell today to the lower right corner. The abuse of legal powers here are not occurring in a vacuum either. I have to remind you tonight, as you may know, that Trump DOJ's attacks on these senior officials in a sort of orderly fashion, if you want to call it that, a kind of a bureaucratic autocracy in Washington, run alongside something much more extreme, the sometimes lethal use of force by Trump administration agents on the streets, which drew those big protests this weekend, and we have more on that later tonight. Some Wall Street and Republican figures also see a red line crossed today with Powell, which is why we can report within this quick span of time more pushback than on certain other matters, including, for example, how people are treated in the streets by ICE. Now, that partly may be because he is so key to the economy, so he just touches a lot of other things, and they already know that. For many others in these elite circles, it may be that they see him as a more relatable or sympathetic target. A 72-year-old establishment figure who holds this job because he was first elevated to the Fed by President Trump in his first term. He is someone who has stated facts and disagreed with the president, but he is literally an early Trump appointee and was renewed by President Biden in that now decaying tradition where you hold over certain people because they are in the job, not necessarily because you've already vetted them politically. So if some on Wall Street or in these elite Republican circles see this tonight as a red line, there is a dark echo here for autocratic times if you know your history. When they came for the immigrants, I didn't stand up. I wasn't an immigrant. When they came for the protesters, I didn't stand up. I wasn't protesting. But when they came for the Trump appointee chair of the Federal Reserve and all the money coursing through Wall Street, well, now some elites are standing up. Republican Senator Tillis, using his key role on these issues, because he has a banking role, they're in oversight in the Senate to push back. He says it's clear now the Trump administration wants to end the independence of the Fed. He says in this statement that Trump and Bondi's DOJ are actually the entity that faces questions over independence and credibility. And Tillis is going beyond just typing. He has vowed now, through his role, to fight Trump on the whole plot and the effort to reshape the Fed, saying, we'll see if he does this, but going farther than some Republicans, saying he will oppose any more nominees by Trump to the Fed, resisting any effort to change the composition of the Fed until the DOJ resolves or backs down on this probe, which Tillis says is purely an abuse of power. So on the one hand, wow, so Republican actually standing up. And not just saying, hey, we got to put pressure and watch the courts and do all the things we hear from elites in D.C. He's actually using the power he has and saying, I get it. You want to control the Fed. Congress has a say. We're not going to let you put anybody on here if you keep up with this BS. That's what he's saying. We'll see if he lives up to it. But on the other hand, I just reminded you that they're shooting people in the face in the streets. And they've indicted all those people I showed you on that chart. So if it takes Powell to wake you up, okay. And if it takes the next one to wake you up, fine. And if it takes too long to wake up, well, you won't be awake to fight when they take all of it away.